the original idea for this was, we published this research project, the Podcast Atlas. I was very proud of it. It was one of the coolest things I think that I've ever gotten the chance to work on. And the original idea that behind this webinar was, well, what if we showed this research to some actual real live human marketers, people who do growth for brands, people who are actually in charge of, uh, you know, turning this stuff into action, and kind of going through the research a little bit and talking about how a real human marketer would read it. And then Krystina had the brilliant idea of, yes, and let's do that, but not make it suck. And so that's what we're going to do here today is a kind of an informal vibe, or as much of a vibe as I can generate, as I'm fairly recently missing a wisdom tooth, and with it much of my IQ. So we're going to get through this as best we can, and I think you're going to enjoy this because this is something that, often when I present research, as I've done over the past several weeks with the Podcast Atlas, I kind of present it like I'm I don't know, mid-level lecturer at a large state university to freshmen as a survey course. I'm just, trying to get through and hope people make sense of it. But the sort of next step, like how does somebody, a real practitioner, take this information, make better decisions for their clients, make better decisions for brands? Um, that is something that I think we all could stand to see a lot more of. And we have two amazing practitioners of that arcane art with us today. So I'm Tom Webster, partner at Sounds Profitable. We're going to be talking about some research in the Podcast Atlas, and I'm joined today by two extraordinarily intelligent human beings, Krystina Rubino from Right Side Up and Tori Murray from Quo. And I'm going to just let's hear a little bit about you and what each of your shops do. So, Krystina, tell us a little bit about Right Side Up. You're certainly one of the leading practitioners of the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about turning this data into actionable insights to help your clients grow. So, tell us a little bit about you and what you all do.
Thank you. That's a lovely intro. Um, Thank you also for joining us. And I look forward to the time today for you that you can just like turn everything off and go and deal with that dry socket. So everybody be nice to Tom today. That's we're gonna be gentle with Tom. I mean, as much as I'm capable of. I'm Krystina. I'm the GM of Offline at Right Side Up. I started the practice here over 8 years ago because I thought the traditional agency model was going the way of the dinosaurs, and I still believe that. I also half jokingly told the CEO and founder here that if I ever got wind of it being a traditional agency, I was just going to quit on the spot. So if that doesn't inform you of the vibe herein that we are working with, the goal is just to do the very best work possible and to do it with brands that are unique and interesting. And, the best thing that you can do in marketing is just hold a microphone up to the great work that brands do. Product market fit is really important. And on that note, I have known, the head of, I think he's the head of marketing at Quo. I'm like, who? It's Jordan now. Um, I'm like, Jordan's fancy now. I have known the head of marketing at Quo for a few years. We worked together while he's at a couple of different companies. And when he joined Quo, I was like, wait a second, this is extremely cool. And also, this is going to absolutely kill on podcasts. So, got to meet Tori at the same time, and I will let her introduce herself and the company.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. Thanks, Tom. Excited to be here. My name's Tori. I lead paid growth at Quo, so effectively all of our advertising channels. And for those of you who haven't heard about Quo on a podcast lately, Quo is a business communications platform basically that helps businesses manage their customer calls and texts, work together as a team, and really at the end of the day, make sure they never miss a chance to connect with their customers. And yeah, we've been in the podcast space for a minute now and having a lot of fun doing it.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about some of the findings that you all thought were interesting from the Podcast Atlas, which was our most recent kind of flagship study that we released. And I'll just give a slight preamble to that for those who aren't familiar with it. The podcast atlas was my attempt to unite the fractious territories of podcasting around the creator, because the audience does not live in those silos. The audience interacts with creators in multiple channels: audio, video, clips, social, and newsletters were the five that we really looked at in the podcast atlas. It's not farmers and cowmen to the audience, although sometimes to us it is. It does seem that way, but no, they're really the audience are they're all the same people following the creator across these multiple channels, and this was really an attempt to kind of map the territory as a unified creator centered universe, and I'm fairly proud of it. I think it was a pretty good piece of work. So, but that is for Tori and Krystina to decide, because I'm going to turn things over to Krystina to pick it apart and talk about how you would actually, what you would pay attention to, what you would ignore, what you shouldn't ignore, and how you actually use this stuff. So, Krystina, why don't you take it away?
Sounds good. Um, what we did here was I've picked our top 10 slides for data that we looked at and were like, yes, I don't know. Here's how I translate it into, the work that we do. Um, and the first things first, I was teasing Tom and I was like, I know how much goes into these studies, and I know how much, like how important this slide is. But when you're reviewing research from a trusted provider like Sounds Profitable, you're basically like, cool, right? Like you're just like, this is an incredibly important slide for Tom to get right. This is a slide for me where I'm like, okay, like we did it. The biggest part of this for me was to keep in mind as you're going through the podcast atlas that this is not necessarily Gen Pop, right? So when you think about consumer research broadly, what you're thinking about is like, these are how the average, in this case, US consumer engages. That is the sample, the overall sample here. But a lot of the takeaways in this study are from primes, which are each platform's most engaged users. So when you look at that, and when you think about, if you're in podcast advertising, who is actually seeing most of your ads, I would wager that if you index it, you're exposing your brand to a lot more of these consumers. Frankly, that's why I also think podcasts work so well. I was literally thinking about this morning, where it's like, podcast advertising always, since its inception, since it was available, has been a way to reach people who are very slightly on the vanguard, right? Early adopters of the medium, up until recently, where it kind of shifted into like mainstream to an extent. So with that, so the trust in this medium, I agree here. Like audio leads on credibility. And this is also where we'll talk about this a little bit throughout, but this is consumer research. But Tori is a marketer at a B2B brand. What's interesting about that is, I'm not sure if you guys know this, we all work at businesses and we are all people. We are all consumers. So this is where it's like, also from a trust perspective, Tori, you're trusting people, or you're asking people to trust Quo with a pretty important part of their business, right? Like if people don't get the phone answered, like you're going to lose out on a sale. You're going to lose out on an opportunity for your business that, for the small businesses you guys work for, could be absolutely huge for them.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why, getting that trust and credibility piece right up front is so important for us, because this is not like a $20 impulse purchase. This is something that like actually makes a meaningful difference in how this person is running their business. And so I think both the place where they first encounter the brand can matter a great deal, but then also the way that they're continuously exposed to the brand matters a lot. And I think podcast has a really great platform to, both present your brand to an audience for the first time, but also continuing to reinforce that message amongst a, hosts and a platform that folks like really truly do believe in. And I think this research, really pointed to that.
Yeah. And I also looked at this and was like, oh, these are top two box. These are the people who engaged with the medium, who engage with the medium the most, who favor the medium the most. Even if somebody favors a platform, it doesn't mean they trust the ads on it. So like if you look at the results herein from like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, notably TikTok for me, I was like, ooh, look at that. I don't know about you guys. I have gotten got from TikTok shop before. I am woman enough to admit that. And there's something here of like, even if you're an avid consumer of the medium, it doesn't necessarily translate to a trust metric getting moved the way that it does in podcast.
I wonder too if, so much of TikTok is obviously influencer marketing and, humans that have
Hmm.
some kind of influence in a particular, niche, or as the French would say, niche. Um, with there's a high score here for had a bad experience for TikTok, and I wonder if that's uh, a bad influencer brand match, and someone did not do their homework on the other party, one or the other. I'm not in that business, but it's a curiously much higher number than you see for audio and video podcasting.
Yeah. I'm only going to speak as a consumer. TikTok is actually the only media platform that I've never personally bought ads on. Um, I now look at most of the TikToks and I'm an avid consumer. Like much to the detriment of my overall attention span, right? I look at TikTok ads now and look at just any kind of video recommending something on TikTok with a degree of skepticism that I don't personally feel when I engage with ads or content in other channels. I look at it and I'm like, okay, you're trying to sell me a vacuum, or you're trying to sell me this, or you're trying to sell me that. Sometimes I'll still engage with the ads, but there's an active parsing of what is real because basically, too much of a good thing is not always a good thing. Brands realize that TikTok works really, really well for like creator-led marketing. And now it is a vast majority of what you're served on the platform. I would even argue sometimes my feed feels more like ads than content. The other piece of it is from an affiliate perspective, creators can self-select that they want to work with a brand through a platform like Commission Junction or Partner Stack or whatever. So that's where you see a lot of like creators just taking monetization in their own hands. And so that by nature has you get fewer controls over that as a brand if you're opening up an affiliate program. So that's also part of it as well.
You actually said something that uh, two words, self-selected, or one if you're a fan of the hyphen. That to me, I have a theory about all of this, and that is that podcasts are truly a self-selected medium, right? A human selects a very particular podcast, and when there's
Yes.
advertising messaging in that podcast, to not give that at least a fair shake is to say, well, I made a bad choice in my selection here, and people don't typically do that, right? You've chosen a thing,
Right.
there's a natural trust. TikTok uh, is a medium with one channel. It is entirely not self-selected. Yes, there's an algorithm that may tune some things, but you're not saying I want to see this particular thing, I want to watch this particular show. You've got one channel, and it is being fed to you. And I think a lot of people are acutely aware of that, even as they're being entertained by it.
Yeah. I You do feel served to is a nice way of putting it. But there is the fact that podcasting is on demand presents so many challenges for us as marketers. But it's like for every challenge that it presents in terms of attribution and having to be patient, or, because of the like, we don't have to get into attribution yet, but it is one of the biggest challenges in the medium. Even just like I promise the performance is coming, just have patience for the first like month of a campaign. Tori's laughing because it's a conversation that we've like Because you're so used to, as marketers, I mean, as humans, but as marketers, you're so used to the instant gratification that you get from a platform like AdWords or, from ads from Meta, that when you're now having to like recalibrate your thinking from strategy, planning, execution, all the way to measurement, you're having to recalibrate your thinking around an on-demand medium. There becomes a thing where it's like, is it worth it? And I'd argue like it's worth it.
Mm.
Clearly, because I've decided to, I'm a generalist by trade. I actually did not start my career in offline marketing. I have bounced around to every emergent channel in the last 20 years because that's what brings me joy. That's what I'm the most interested in. This is a medium that's special for a number of reasons. Actually, look at my segue. You're you're doing you're like I said, we have a fractured attention span as like humans, right? Even in how I'm speaking now, I've got like six thoughts running simultaneously, and I'm like, I've got to get them all out. Yes, I do have ADHD. But the attention and listening context of the medium is very, very, very unique. So when you think about like, are you mostly paying attention or are you paying full attention? This is self-reported, of course, but they're also doing other things while they're listening to podcasts. An example. I crochet. I will, if I'm in the middle of a row, right? If I'm in the middle of crocheting, I may or may not stop and pause and like skip an ad, right? We could talk about ad skipping another time. But I'm listening and I'm doing something with my hands, and I forget what that's called, but it's basically like when you are doing something kind of banal with your hands and you're using your full brain to pay attention to something around you. Like I'll sometimes crochet on one-on-ones that I have with people on a team. And everybody knows part of it is so I don't go and open Slack. And so I don't like shiny red ball with the next thing that comes across my vision, right? So it's like I look at podcasting as a medium where, if you're doing something else, it is a medium that you're still able to engage with and have a high degree of engagement with. And Tori, for you, for small business owners, like I these are people that are always doing something else. Like they're driving, or like a salon owner is probably in the middle of giving somebody a highlighter. What like it gives you an opportunity to appear to somebody who is go maybe interested in your product during a window of time where you otherwise would not be able to reach those people.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why like sometimes we misconstrue paying attention with like staring at a screen, quite literally. And I think in general, that's really not the case. And like you said, like
Yeah.
really wouldn't be getting many of these folks' attention at the rate and frequency that we do if we were relying on video-based mediums alone. Like there's just no way. Like you just described, like we're all doing 10 things at once, and forget about it if you're owning a small business and whatever else you might be doing. And so this allows us to reach them while they're driving to work, while they're opening up shop, like while they're walking their dog, with whatever they're doing. And so I really think it allows us to be more present than we would be if we were engaging in mediums that were based on, you literally looking at the screen alone.
This is
Yeah.
one of
And
those.
even in the mediums, oh, what was that, Tom?
I was gonna say this is one of those questions too. Anytime you have a B2B marketer like yourself or somebody who's selling to other businesses, and they'll say, "Well, this is consumer research. What about for businesses?" This is the kind of question that pertains to everybody, right? I mean, this is
Yeah.
about a human paying attention, and so it's completely applicable either way. And I know sometimes B2B research is a challenge. I've certainly done enough of it in my career, but I mean, do you read this any differently as a B2B marketer than you might as a B2C marketer?
I really don't. And I think that's because at the end of the day, like we are all consumers. I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make in B2B advertising is thinking you only need to show up in these very heavy business related areas with your advertising. Because if you think about it, yes, somebody might own a business and sure, like perhaps they're listening to business related podcasts or things to help them be better at the trade or whatever it is that they do. But they also have interests just like the rest of us outside of that, whether that be comedy, cooking, traveling, whatever the case may be. And so we are, wanting to be in front of these folks and, all of these different places, and really just meeting customers where they
Yeah.
are. And that's true of B2B or B2C marketing. So I think there's a lot more that I think that is relatable in this research to B2B than people might think right off the bat, because at the end of the day, it's consumers you're talking to.
Yeah, it's true. And to your point, actually, about if it's staring at a screen, we don't know if people are staring at the screen, even when they're playing video podcasts. This is the same challenge that we've navigated with TV for years. And I was teasing Tom while we were prepping for this and being like, can somebody do an eye tracking survey? Like, I don't know if everybody remembers that old school research of like just doing eye tracking and like heat mapping on a screen. Like, we looked at that over time. When I used to work in display advertising, we looked at that to help inform which ad units people were actually looking at. That's why 300 by 250 has been the predominant ad unit in the medium for, oh God, now it's got to be like 20 years. Um, but that's the part where it's like we actually don't know how much of the time that people spend watching video podcasts are spent watching on screen versus listening. That's why I always tell advertisers, I'm like, listen, you have to make sure that the audio for podcast stands alone, that the read that you're, you know, trying to engineer, right? Because we don't script the ads that we do with creators when it's host read. You know, if it's a produced spot, that's different. But when it's host read, we're not scripting. We are essentially producing. We're co-producing an ad, right? We're giving copy points. We're like, here, please explain the most salient parts of my brand because people may be unfamiliar with it, or maybe we have a new product or there's a launch or something like that. But what you don't have is a medium where it's just like, you know, okay, this is how I'm going to read the ad and this is how it's going to be. And I'm going to do this verbatim. And it's not radio. So you just want to make sure that the way you're engineering, that the way you're prompting the host is allowing them to deliver your message in a way that if somebody is, you know, scrolling other social media or exercising or walking or whatever. Um, you know, which I would even point out here, like, so look at some of the numbers here. Doing housework or chores. Okay, that if your top viewing context is video and you're doing housework or chores, unless you're doing a shitty job, you're probably not giving this 100% of your attention, right? You're going to see relaxing with dedicated attention higher than audio podcasts, which makes absolute sense. But just, I would still invite people like, there's so much going on in, especially in like the wonkier parts of the industry where we're talking about video, like it's this new advent and this thing that's going to just fundamentally change the medium, etc. Yes, and video has been available, simulcasts have been available and have been performing well for brands since I got into the medium in like 2016. So to me, it's nothing new. It presents measurement challenges, but I would still invite people to look at podcasting as like, and even frankly, YouTube advertising as I should probably make sure that if somebody has their eyes closed, this still makes sense.
Yeah, and no metric is perfect, right? I mean, we can ask, is someone paying attention to this
No.
podcast ad or not? But YouTube has viewability. Things like billboards and outdoor have opportunity to see, right? I mean, all of these things are, well, we've put an ad out there, and magazines have circulation, but I mean, nobody is measuring, did they actually pay attention to it?
Right. Oh, I just lost my screen. There we go. Give me 1 second. Um, and the other point, yes. And the other point also here is when we think about where audio goes, this is when I laugh because people are always like, well, I don't listen to radio. I'm like, yeah, you do. No, I don't. Yes, you do. Have you taken an Uber lately? Have you been in a grocery store? Oh, you don't listen to streaming audio advertising? Did you get your nails done this week? Like, it is literally, of course you listen to different audio formats. Sometimes you do it against your will. So this is where I look at this data and I look at the comparison of the different formats and I say, okay, overall though, audio is a companion throughout someone's day. And I kind of teased this earlier, but it might lead to ad exposure in otherwise ungettable moments. Um, Sorry, I'm having like a fun little technical difficulty. Can you guys still see everything?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Awesome. For some reason, my video in Zoom was like, I'm going to take up the whole screen. And I'm like, why? This is not, I didn't ask you for that. Um, but yeah, and also it might be different for different populations. So like, for example, if somebody is, and Tori, we had kind of talked about this a little bit, but if somebody's driving in a car, I would hope that they are fully focused on the road in a way that, audio is a companion to their experience at the time versus, dedicated attention in terms of staring at a screen, right? Um, so yeah, I think that was my only big point on the slide.
Just
Ah,
on that real
oh,
quick, just kind of for both
yeah,
of you.
yeah,
I mean, we talk a lot about video podcasting, and then there's also YouTube as its own dog, all the things on YouTube that are not podcasts. I mean, do you treat those
right.
as separate things? Do you buy them separately? Do you have different expectations for them?
Yeah, we do have separate programs for podcast and podcast related audio buying on YouTube versus, what we do from a creator or even just like a pure ad standpoint on YouTube. And so I would say we're probably on YouTube in like at least three different ways at the moment. And we do measure those all differently based on the channel and spend and the creative and all of those different things in terms of how we're showing up there.
Mhm. Yeah, same here. If it's video only, if it's truly just YouTube, then we absolutely are buying it differently. I will say the lines are getting blurrier and blurrier as months go on, right? Like the question of like what is a podcast? And there is so much about the the medium that's changing to the extent that it's almost like, okay, are we going to be calling it podcast in another couple of years? That said, the difference between a YouTube show and a podcast is still well defined enough for most advertisers. And the other part is if you don't buy it differently and you don't measure it differently, specifically, you're going to do YouTube a disservice because when you look at audio performance, you've got the ability to, either via prefix or pixel, you have the ability to understand single channel attribution in a way that because Google is a closed platform owned by one company that you don't have on YouTube, right? So what winds up happening then is that if you're modeling data based on just purely your understanding of YouTube performance, if you compare that to audio where you have more data from like a higher signal from, almost always, YouTube is going to look depressed in terms of performance compared to, a simulcast show or an audio only show. So it's like, that's why you've got to segment the spend. And I think a lot of publishers don't fully understand that. They're just trying to get on budget for whatever they can get on budget for. But it's like if you wind up and you're a predominantly like 95% video show, or if you're not even available in audio and you're being compared to podcasts, you actually might be doing yourself a disservice versus just selling it as a YouTube show. I love this. Host reads work for a reason. There's a reason that we're willing to pay a premium for them. There's a reason that consumers skip them at a far lower rate than, produced ads. I did think it was really interesting to see here that like there's a definitive preference for it, but well produced I'm looking. YouTube is going to look depressed to an audio podcast because this consumption of audio is massively different than video, the unspoken and over research part of podcasting right now. Yeah, it absolutely. I think it really does come down to the actual. When I say measurement, I'm actually talking about performance, not views or engagements or anything like that. I'm literally talking about advertiser return on investment. Um, that is an interesting point. Tom, do you think that it's a under-researched or unresearched part of podcasting?
I mean, we've put out a few studies that have tried to close that loop, but ultimately it is a it almost requires ethnographic research and just kind of at some kind of scale, watching how people actually do this stuff, watching people actually watch podcasts,
Hmm.
and watching, are there, does the way that they consume a show differ if they have the screen on as opposed to when it's minimized and things like that. It's a research challenge. It's not an intractable one, but it's yeah, it's definitely could stand to use more research. I mean,
Yeah,
anything could stand to use
makes
more
sense.
research, right? That's my hammer, so everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, you're not biased at all.
No.
Also, can you guys still see my screen as a full
Yeah, we
screen?
can. We can.
Okay,
Not as a
fantastic.
full
Without my
screen.
browser tab in it?
We see your browser tab. We see all of your
Great.
browser tabs. Oh my
Just,
goodness.
oh my God, so much
Yeah.
porn.
That's
Um,
wow. I didn't think anybody still looked at that site. Okay.
you know, so find me, guys. I now have you guys on, your video is now on my second monitor. There's nothing like this webinar has been actually par for the course for this week, I think Tom and I would argue. Um, yeah. But what I love about this is also uh, it's I don't mean it in a mean way, but the relationship that some people have with podcast hosts is almost parasocial. Like they think that these are their friends, but not in like like not in like a stalker, like single white female kind of way. Like not like, you know what I mean? Like not like a weird way. It's more like it's these are people that you try. It's such an intimate medium. Like you're literally listening to it sometimes like in your ears, right? So you just and people, podcasters often show a vulnerability. Like one of my personal favorite podcasts is Giggly Squad. And I love Hannah Berner and Paige DeSorbo, like just queens. And Hannah had this whole thing recently where she got dysport in her jaw and got too much of it. And now when she smiled, it's like the most insane smile. Like it's completely insane. And she could have made a choice to just be like, I am not going to be perceived by humanity right now. And instead, she was just like so transparent about it. Like it turned into a whole bit. It's been great. And it's just very on brand for her. And there was just such a vulnerability to it. And it's like, if somebody is transparent about when they did something to their face that went wrong and didn't immediately go into hiding, they're probably going to be pretty honest about other aspects of their life. And they're also something that I always tell advertisers, sometimes people get mad when hosts say no. Like, how dare you? I'm trying to give you money. And I'm like, no, that's a gift. That is a gift. If a host is telling you they do not want to work with you, that is absolutely a gift. That means the ad probably is not going to work. That means they don't believe in your product. And that lack of belief in your product is going to translate very neatly to the show underperforming against better shows, right? The other part of it is just from a host led and creator led perspective, every medium has a price. We look at, and Tori, I'm sure you can speak to this, when we see a show or a placement in any medium pop off, of course, as marketers, we're sitting there going, how can we extend this reach? How can we improve this performance? How can we bring this to other channels? Like, what can we do here? Like, is there an opportunity now to take this creative and bring it into TikTok or Instagram, right? And that's why we negotiate for more usage rights now than we did even 6 months ago. It's crazy. Um, but the piece of it is I'm not willing to pay for those impressions from creators at the same rate that I'm willing to pay for podcasts because, Tom, of all of the reasons that you listed out earlier, this is an on-demand medium. People are actively choosing to consume it. There's so many things about the attention that you get on ads and podcasting that are really unique to the medium, to where conversely, there's a big push from a lot of networks now to package impressions together from like Reels and
Hmm.
YouTube Shorts. And I'm like, don't do that. Unless you would like me to pay you a CPM that's a fraction of what you're getting now, please stop. Please don't do that. Don't choose personal violence. If the show works really, really well, we will find you and find ways to give you more money. Guaranteed.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we've taken away from it too is that really digging into like what is working about the thing that's working. Like, is it the host,
Yeah.
the audience, or is it the genre? And I think for Quo, like one of the biggest unlocks for us has been, okay, this show is working. It's, as Krystina, you would know, like it's not easy to just say, great, I'm going to buy 10 times more of this show. Like it just doesn't scale that way. And so in that world, like unfortunately,
Yeah.
so then in that world, what is it telling us about the genre? And can we buy 5 to 10 additional shows to test? And then now we're really expanding and able to drive growth. And so I think that's been one of the biggest learnings beyond just like that specific creator. It's really opened up the aperture of what we've been able to test and scale into to grow the program.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like that's exactly right about the balance of frequency. Like you need enough to make sure the ad resonates. You need enough to accumulate that, you get to Cume and you're like, okay, like people are understanding the product, etc. It's real easy to tip into if I hear an ad for this product one more time, I'm gonna burn it all down. Very easy in this medium. In many channels. But in this medium, it's like the suggestion from partners, even agencies that work on commission, is like, let's just buy more frequency. And you're like, no, you're going to literally tank performance. And then now you've burned out your core, right? And that's not to say, like, for certain brands, like during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, throw an extra spot. Just throw an extra shrimp on the Barbie. Absolutely. Like, if you want to, like, plus up during, like, let's just say a product launch or a rebrand or whatever, there's reasons to make that conscious decision. But media worky good, give more money, not not in the way that you would like it to work necessarily in this medium. Another interesting tactic, to your point, Tori, is like, what is working about this and what can we then take and expand, right? And that's where produced ads are a very valuable tool in the marketer's playbook in podcast. We, I have been continuously surprised at how much produced advertising we buy now in podcast. I would not have predicted this 3 or 4 years ago
Hmm.
because podcast CPMs have taken a minute from like a run of network, programmatic, et cetera perspective to come into the reality of like, if it's not a host read ad, I can't pay as much for it. I need that. I need the CPM to be a fraction of what you'd be willing to pay if like so and so is voicing your ad, right? But it works at the right price. And this research backs why. It's not like people are like, you know, like first of all, some people are saying they prefer produced ads, which I'd love to meet those people. That's fascinating to me. Again, didn't, but there's a lid for every pot, right? Um, but I look at this and I go, okay, some people don't even see a difference from a self-reported perspective. That's really interesting. Doesn't mean that there isn't a difference in how they downstream purchase things or act on ads that they listen to. But it means that produced ads, to me, I'm like, this bolsters the fact that produced ads have a place in the channel. Um, I can't imagine why mid-rolls don't are work as well as they do. And everybody wants to buy them. So weird, you guys. So weird. Um, I Please don't pay for post rolls. If you're gonna buy pre-rolls, be really intentional about why you're doing it. If you're gonna blend them, make sure you're paying an adjusted CPM. Like these are just like best practices that you can take into account when you're buying in the medium. But if you look at the way, like when you look at, okay, 71% of consumers either finish like more than, I should say, 71% of consumers finish a podcast more than half of the time. That's amazing. That I'm not going to compare it to other mediums. I didn't come prepared to do that, but that is pretty incredible when you think about like somebody again choosing the content and choosing to follow through with the content and it capturing their attention. Like I have to imagine that is something that is only being rivaled from like hour-long dramas and something like that. Like that, like there's something to that. Um, and there's a reason that mid-rolls work as well as they do. Now, I would love for us to get away from a point where we're just trying to cram 10 pounds of mid-rolls in a 5-pound bag. Um, because too much of a good thing is, again, too much of a good thing. When we start to see ad stuffing occur, we do start to see, regardless of consumer attention, you do start to see a degradation in performance. We've actually, for a couple of networks, I blinded the data last year and took a cross section across all of our advertisers and sent it to them from before they had made a change to go from 4 mid-rolls to 6, and performance notably declined, like statistically declined. And it helped us just negotiate lower CPMs. And at that point, did adding more ads to the episode really accomplish what you wanted it to, which is more revenue per listener? No, it didn't. It just wound up washing out. So be really intentional about the way, from a publisher perspective, you guys are programming your shows. And then conversely, from an advertiser's perspective, be really intentional about the shows that you're buying host read versus the shows that you're buying produced versus the shows that you're buying programmatically. Is there any good research out there about the conversion friction caused by listener apathy due to audience listener habits? Listeners hearing sponsors while multitasking, but not being able to easily find the specific sponsor's promo or link later. There's some research about that. What I would say is this is why marketers use MMM or MTA, because this is the way that, a vast majority of podcast actions come up, or are measured, is not via promo code or direct URL hit or anything like that. What you wind up starting to see, if you're buying enough podcast, you start to see direct traffic increase. You start to see brand search increase. You start to see other channels that capture demand working better. So, like, for example, you might see that paid search is popping a little bit more. And if you're just looking at last click or, even some sort of weighted attribution system, that's not taking into account the difference between demand generation and capture, you're going to vastly undercount the performance that you see from the medium. The demand generating channels like podcast advertising and offline channels in general are the answer to the question, how can we buy more brand search? That's it. Anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's spot on. Like I have very little expectation that anyone is hearing us on a podcast and pulling out their wallet in that moment. My expectation is that they're hearing
That's
us,
right.
they're going to remember us, they're going to search for us later, they're going to bring other people into that decision, they're going to consider us. And that's huge. Like that's how it all kind of kicks off. And so if you don't have that measurement in place to account for that fact that they're likely not going to put in the code, they're not going to, people aren't, unfortunately, like aren't going to do what you ask them to do. It just isn't a linear journey.
No.
And so, so at the end of the day, like you have all those things in place, certainly, like give them the code, give them the way to click, like make it so if they do want to take a linear journey, like by all means. But at the end of the day, I would say like 90+% of the time, that won't be the case. And so if the measurement isn't in place to prove that, then it'll be really hard to get investment to grow this channel.
And it's
Yeah,
also not rocket surgery to figure this stuff out with surveys. I mean, if you don't do that kind of work every now and then, Google takes credit for everything. So people,
sure do.
they may not have purchased something immediately after hearing a podcast ad, but if you ask them later what influenced them the most, you're often going to hear the podcast.
That's correct. And that's why I'm a big fan. I trust nothing and no one when it comes to attribution. I look at single channel attribution, like from one of the measurement platforms. It's super helpful. I look at MMM, I look at surveys. I am a very big fan of overlapping and redundant methodologies. Like, put that on my tombstone. I'm laughing because I just saw Jay Soderberg said, I just heard networks should be negotiating larger CPMs for less ad loads. And I'm hearing podcasters should charge a higher CPM to include links and codes in their show notes and websites. You're hearing what you want to hear. Um, Here's what you're hearing. Networks should be negotiating larger CPMs for less ad load. No. Networks who are charging larger CPMs, once they add more ads in, need to expect that advertisers are going to negotiate them down. We do factually pay higher CPMs for shows that are more host read, more driven, ad served embedded or embedded. Like these are the reasons that advertising in this medium commands a premium. The rest of it is actually degrading the CPMs that are currently being paid by advertisers for the channel. In terms of charging a higher CPM to include links and codes in their show notes, you can try. That is the goal for a show should be to help an advert. If you're trying to monetize via ads, the goal for a show should be trying to help an advertiser make money from the placement in your show in a way that feels authentic to the listening experience. If you charge for that, then you're not listening to the notion of no one is looking at the show notes while they are engaging with the content. So you can try. This is where it's not going to do what you want it to do. You might make a little bit more revenue in the short term, but in the long term, you're going to be less favorably compared to some of your peer shows that wind up performing better because the CPMs are more affordable. But show links and codes and show notes and websites, that's table stakes for the medium. Again, because you're paying a premium placement. If this were streaming spoken word audio, we'd be at sub $10 CPMs, period. Where we're still paying, 18, 22, 25, 30, $40 CPMs in some cases, and happy to pay it. But the more that publishers degrade the advertiser experience, what happened in display with banner ads is going to happen here in podcasting, just factually. So pricing is elastic. Pricing should be based on demand, frankly. If you've ever heard Thomas Mancusi talk about the way that he prices shows, it is literally like, it's some beautiful mind shit. Like, I never thought that I would give Kuzi as much money in my career as I have given that man. And it is because I hope somebody clips this and sends it to him, but it's because he looks at the overall performance and value of a show relative to the offering that's being given to advertisers and makes it fair for everyone. And that is an art of the art and science part of this channel. This is an emergent medium. It is not accurately measured by MRI, Kantar, Nielsen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what you're looking for as a buyer is you're looking for signals. You're trying to parse noise for signals, right? And so these are all helpful ways to parse that noise and eliminate the white noise and actually understand like what is working about this channel. And the more that partners can help you do that as an advertiser, the more money you give them. If you look at the before and after of some of the leaders in the industry when they've moved around from place to place of how much we give somebody, like in terms of funds, there are like people that will go to a new network and change the fortunes of that network because they're bringing best practices that they've gleaned throughout their career. Maybe they're lessening ad load. Maybe they're changing the ways that hosts are doing reads. Maybe they're getting more involved in the, way that advertisers are vetted. There's so much nuance. You put a quarter in me, Jay.
Shout out
But
Thomas Mancusi.
don't we all love a koozie? He's insane, but he's our insane, like in the best way possible. If a show works, we kind of teased this out earlier. Find a way to work with the host on other platforms. It might not be one-to-one, but performance is a way that you can look at possible reach extension opportunities. We have done some truly unhinged shit with shows where like one time we sponsored a live stream when we were working with a popular food delivery platform and they wanted to do chicken nugget pong. So like instead of beer pong, throw chicken nuggets into cup. We didn't ask a lot of questions. The biggest thing was I remember being in the back of a cab during podcast movement and having a fierce debate on whether we should do Wendy's or McDonald's chicken nuggets. That is a sentence that's never been uttered before in the English language. So not like, in the context of advertising. So when you think about like ways to follow a host from platform to platform, I loved this note of like the creator is the moat. The creator is the raison d'etre. That's why we're here. Like, yes, follow them around in a non-creepy way. Make it make sense.
Second
Um,
piece, second bit of French today. So thanks. Big
there
ups
you go.
for
We'll
raison
see if we
d'etre.
can we'll see if we can get a third going. Give me a challenge. The economy of the ecosystem. So there's a couple of interesting points here. You can very easily misconstrue this data. So if you hear 72% of podcast-driven purchases are under $300. Tori, I don't know about you, but my immediate instinct, if I were a less like if I frankly if I were younger, I'd look at that and be like, "Oh, they don't buy top like high ticket items." That could be a way that you misconstrue that. Meanwhile, we know that they do because B2B advertising works. What is one of, and frankly, from a consumer perspective, what is one of the most popular categories in podcast advertising? Mattresses. Mattresses do not cost less than $300. So I have found personally that yes, 72% of podcast driven purchases might be under $300. First of all, a vast majority of our purchases or consumers are under $300, right? So if you just think about it, I would say like that's interesting. For me, I look at also categories are not always a choice that a consumer makes, right? So let's just say that you're going to your doctor for your annual physical, and the doctor's like, listen, you gotta lose some weight. Like your cholesterol's high, your blood pressure's high, it's this, it's that, it's the other thing. That is not a choice that you're making to think about making lifestyle changes. Maybe you're going to do a meal plan. Maybe you're going to do, a meal kit delivery subscription. Maybe you're going to look at a GLP-1 or other weight loss solution, right? That's not, you might make choices, but now you are a purchaser in a category that you got put into, right? Automotive is another one. People always think of it as like people out here shopping for cars. Like, oh my God, I want to see what I can buy. What if your car breaks down? You didn't choose, and it's too expensive to fix it relative to the value of it. That's how my poor Toyota died a number of years ago. Like, rip, right? I didn't choose to buy a new car then. All of a sudden, I was thrust into doing research for a purchase that I didn't think that I was going to have to make that year. Um, and then also, what about B2B, right? B2B works really, really well in podcasting even though there's probably a ton of waste. And we don't talk about that necessarily, but like Tori, if you were going to target just like purely like business decision makers, it's a really expensive audience to hyper target, right? So,
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just not at the end of the day, like I think it's really dangerous to think of this like $300 as a ceiling because like I said earlier, like it's really just and like we talked about at the beginning of this, like this is all building trust, driving consideration. It's doing a lot of really important work. And even if you think about now like the importance of word of mouth, even your LM that you're asking these questions to, like all of these things are places people go to continue to educate themselves and build trust and learn more. And that's what is also happening during the podcast ad. And so it's okay if the purchase is not happening at that moment, but I'd argue that without that trust and consideration, like the purchase might not even occur at the end of the day. So
Well, we are
yeah.
coming up to the top of the hour, so I want to give you both a chance to just say one final thing about really the overall topic of today, which is how how you process this kind of information, how it helps you make decisions, doesn't help you make decisions, how you sort of incorporate it into your plans, right? So Tori, just in general, especially with someone with a B2B focus, how do you process this kind of data? How does it help you make decisions?
yeah, I think it's just, continuing to use this to think about like consumer behavior and where how you're meeting consumers where they are and what they're taking away from that type of ad, whether it's on audio or on video. I think it helped to validate a lot of the things that we already do in terms of, the different types of ads we're buying, mid-roll, programmatic, like making sure that you have a diverse mix of media that you're running in order to get in front of the right consumers. And then at the end of the day, just making sure that you're able to triangulate all of that effectively so that you can measure its success and then be able to invest more. And yeah, continue building out a successful program.
So Tori Murray from Quo, thank you very much. And Krystina, I want to thank Right Side Up for making this webinar possible and for all the great work you do. I'm going to give you the last word before we de-zoom everybody's screen.
We de-zoom them. Sounds so mean. Tori said it beautifully. There's this research is very validating. Um, and it also gives you the right words and stats for the things that we know and see to be true and how the medium performs. It's just another signal that you get to parse from the noise in the channel. But Tori, I completely agreed with her take, and I have nothing further to add.
And in your incredibly wise words, media worky good, don't spend more money on media necessarily, right? So that'll be the title of my newsletter next week. Media worky good.
Media worky good.
Media worky good. So Tori, Krystina, and for everybody who joined us, thank you for the gift of your time and attention. This webinar will be available on the Sounds Profitable website within the next day or two, God willing, and the creek don't rise and my head does not fall off from my wisdom tooth extraction. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I hope to see many of you in New York next month. So,
Yeah,
cheers.
we'll be there.